So I'm having a chat with Ian Anderson of Jethro Tull. How are you?
Oh, about the same as I was yesterday. But at my age, that's good news.
Well, yeah, indeed, indeed. We won't.
Continuity is everything.
No, absolutely, absolutely. Hopefully not continuity when it comes to music, but we can get onto that a little bit later because we're going to talk about new music of yours. We've been playing the Tipu House, which is the latest single of yours. Tell us about it.
Well, it's a song from the new album Curious Ruminant, and the Tipo House is um, a notional apartment block in a town where perhaps disadvantaged families have to live together in perhaps not the most salubrious of circumstances, and graffiti-ridden apartment blocks with perhaps a bit of space outside where children can kick a ball around and play. Um, and the tipo is the tipo tree, which is a tree grown particularly in Mediterranean climates as a tree to provide shade. And and this particular notional house I actually found in order to take a photograph for the album artwork. I actually found one not far from a hotel that I often stay in Barcelona. So that became the 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 Tipu house, and the lyrics I slightly altered to fit a Barcelona setting rather than a setting in the south of Italy, or my original thought, which was somewhere set in India. So the lyrics had a little bit of editing and fine tuning, and the one I recorded is the one that's on the album, and that's it's about growing up in adversity, and for some who are ambitious enough and lucky enough, they can rise above that and find successful careers as an adult, in spite of kicking a ball about in the dirt outside a graffiti building.
Nice, nice. And as mentioned, that is coming off your new record, Curious Ruminants, which is out on the 7th of March. What can we expect on the record, and how does it sound in comparison to your previous records?
Well, you can expect a degree of familiarity because after some 55, is it, or 56 years of making records, I do have a certain, not a narrow stylistic range, but nonetheless, I think people will recognize, and not just because they hear a flute or the particular dulcet tones of my voice, but they will recognize the musical points of similarity with a lot of earlier records. But having said that, with each record, I try to move along a bit and perhaps just develop things a little in a not radically different direction, but different enough to keep me feeling that I'm doing something new and not just rehashing the glory days of old. I think that's what most artists would attempt to do, and some might be more successful than others. But so far, from what I've been hearing, people seem to like this one and think that it strikes the right balance.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And you have been releasing music, as you said, for kind of over 50 years. How have you and how has the music evolved since the start through until now?
Well, it began back in 1968 when in order to open some doors, we were playing essentially derivative 12-bar blues at the Marquee Club in London alongside illustrious bands like the early Fleetwood Mac and Savoy Brown and Chicken Shack and a bunch of others. But it was also the beginning of a new era where the elements were being put in place for what became known as progressive rock. And that appealed to me much more than being a blues imitator, which I wasn't very good at anyway. And so I drew upon musical influences from Europe, from classical music, and as well as from folk music and to some degree jazz. But over the years, of course, it became more obvious that Jethro Tull was being regarded as a progressive rock band or a prog rock band even in 1972, 73. And then in 77, 78, probably people regarded us as a folk rock band since there were more elements of particularly British folk music that crept into the songwriting. I wouldn't say that any of these musical styles were particularly passionate favorites of the other band members. Um, it wasn't something we really discussed. And I don't think to this day, if I'm writing a song, I don't sit down and try and analyze it ahead of time, trying to fit it into a category. I just follow my nose and do what I think is the best that I can do and leave it to others to classify
Mm.
and put it on a particular shelf of the supermarket, whether it goes under canned goods or the health food shelves or whatever. That's up to other people to decide where to put the Jethro Tull package.
Yeah, we will wait and see where it goes next week, shall we? And you touched on the writing side of things as well. So for you, how do tracks normally start off?
Sometimes it's with a title, sometimes it's with a an idea as to what it is I want to write about. Sometimes it's a line of melody or a few chords and a pattern. Sometimes it will be some lines of lyrics. I don't have a method. I try, if anything, to avoid writing every song using the same starting point. I rather like variety and try to try to try to build upon songs from whatever source they seem to come. I mean, a visitation from the muse is welcome. Sometimes I'm bestowed with a title, sometimes I'm bestowed with a few lines of lyrics or a bit of a tune. But whatever it is, I grasp it eagerly and then move on. And I like the momentum and I like the pace of writing. I don't do a lot of rewrites. When I'm recording, I don't do a lot of takes. I don't spend ages listening to alternative takes. I find that extremely boring. And I know the instant I've played or sung something, if it's not good enough, delete it. It's gone forever. So I employ what is known as destructive recording. In other words, when I go back over something, it doesn't keep the previous take, it automatically deletes it forever. I don't want to hear it again. It wasn't good enough. So that's the way I work. I'm quite a quick worker. Once I once I get going, that momentum builds up over the course of writing and recording an album.
Nice. And the people of the world, especially in Europe, get the chance to hear you playing some of the new songs, and I'm sure some of the oldies as well, because you're heading out on tour from April. I bet you can't wait to be on the road again.
Yeah, we did some shows last week in Italy, but that was still last year's set list. So the new set list begins on the 1st of April, and that's quite a bit different from what we were playing last year. Uh, Different selection of some old songs, some very old songs, and a couple of songs from the new album, and a song from each of the last two albums. So it's um, it's that vain attempt after all these years to try and come up with a set list that provides the bigger picture of what we do rather than just focusing on one era of music or particularly focusing on entirely on a new album, which, let's be completely frank, does not appeal to most people in the audience who have come to have the gratification of some degree of familiarity or a large degree of familiarity. So it is about trying to satisfy um, all those different aspects of programming a set list. And that problem began back in 1969 when we had our second album released and we had to be selective about what we played. And it got compounded with every successive album in terms of having to leave things out rather than
Mm.
put things in. But that's the way it is. There's no point in complaining about it. It's a bit like a chef who has to come up with a new menu every year or so, perhaps including some of the things that have made that restaurant popular, and they feel they have to include because people come back and order the same thing again. And as someone who likes his saga Lou and his king prawn jalfrezi, I would be upset if they disappeared from the menu. So whilst I'm interested to try something new when it crops up in a restaurant that I've been to a few times, I like the idea of still having some of the things that I recognize and know that I can order and trust.
Mhm.
So it's the same with a music set list.
No, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And the lineup of Jethro Tull has had many iterations over the years. The guys who have joined recently kind of started joining from about 2007 onwards, so they're fairly fresh compared to the timeline that you've been in the band. But Jack's really new as well. How's the new lineup getting on?
Well, the that new lineup actually began in 2004 with John O'Hara on keyboards and David Goodyear on bass guitar, and Scott Hammond started playing with us in 2000 well, he started actually in 2010, but
Mm,
full time from end of 2011 onwards. So that really is quite a long time. I mean, the longest standing members of the band really over the
mm,
years. Um, and Jack Clark, who took over from Joe Parrish James last year, did so because Joe, at the beginning of 2024, decided he just couldn't face all the travel.
mm.
Not a happy traveler, getting increasingly um, stressed with the lifestyle. And so Jack stepped in, having played with us before, albeit on bass guitar a couple of times, and also having covered for John O'Hara by playing all the keyboard parts on guitar. So Jack was very familiar with the band and most of the set list, and he uh, was able then to participate on this new record, most of which was recorded in June and July last year.
Nice, nice. Ian, it's been a pleasure having a chat with you.
Well, nice to talk to you too.